It will wake you up before you'll feel it. It's just like a pressure or a force that's coming through your bedroom.
A kind of a weird jolt or a feeling that something's getting ready to happen. The dogs can kind of get funny right before a big one.
The primary is the one that you initially feel. You don't know it's coming.
All of a sudden you hear this bang, kind of a loud pop, and the whole house will jolt.
It sounded like a sonic boom. I heard a big, loud boom.
And then you know it's going to hit.
You almost feel like the ground's going to open up underneath of you or something.
Well, and it felt like something very heavy had fallen on my house.
People would think maybe someone just drove into their garage door.
And then you think, am I losing my mind? This is the third one today, and they've only reported one.
In Oklahoma, earthquakes have become a fact of life. Beginning in 2009, the state went from experiencing 2 earthquakes of magnitude 3.0 or greater each year to 2 or more each day. It's earned the unlikely title of earthquake capital of the U.S., topping even California. After years of government denial, there's a scientific consensus that most of the earthquakes are man-made, caused by the way oil and gas are produced here. But politicians and industry have been slow to react. Fault lines traveled to Oklahoma to find out why. North central Oklahoma has borne the brunt of the state's rise in earthquakes. Mark Chrisman is a farmer and retired electronics expert in Noble County who voluntarily monitors the earthquakes day and night. In 2014, Oklahoma State University installed a seismometer on his property to collect data about the earthquakes. Since then, Chrisman thinks of little else. His home is surrounded by faults in the ground, as well as oil and gas activity, a volatile combination.
So I monitor it about 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, have ever since it was put in here.
How have the earthquakes affected your home, the area here?
Destroyed it. If you want to know the truth about it, you can't fix it. That was all caused by that 3.3 and 3 threes in one night. One night, the whole house went. I'm telling you, there's a fault 750 feet that way and one that way, and the earthquake was right there. So it just went nuts that night. I mean, crazy. It's what I call a seismic storm. There was 52 incidents in 2.5 hours. And it just went, they just
like lightning in a thunderstorm.
Underground, yeah. So this is called the war room. There's a seismometer.
Look at that.
That's something different than what you're used to seeing.
Over the last few years, Mark says he's experienced hundreds of earthquakes.
Now, is that right now?
Yep, that's live.
So how many have there been today?
If you want to count them all, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These faults are sitting there and they're pressed together, okay? And as long as you leave them alone, everything's fine. But all you got to do is take one of those little suckers and trigger that thing just a little bit. All you got to do is touch it. If that thing slips 10 or 15 or 20 miles, one of those faults does, you've had it. This state will go back to the Stone Age in about 3 seconds.
In 2015 alone, the state recorded more than 800 earthquakes of magnitude 3.0 or greater. In the middle of our interview, 2 earthquakes struck nearby.
Hey, we got something.
That's a 4 something. Let me look at it. That's damn near 5. That's pretty big. Let me get old Angela. That's a pretty big earthquake. This is a seismic storm going on right now.
It's a common misperception that fracking is causing the earthquakes, when in fact, it's really a very different part of the process, right?
Right. Fracking's not causing these earthquakes. Fracking is a simple process of cracking rocks to produce oil and gas.
Fracking has also been linked to earthquakes, but on a much smaller scale. Oklahoma's earthquakes are associated with a different process called wastewater injection. The state's oil fields are saturated with water, which coexists naturally with oil and gas.
In Oklahoma, our oil reservoirs have a lot of water. And so when we produce oil and gas out of them, we have water to dispose of.
For each barrel of oil brought up out of the ground, 10 or more barrels of water come with it. After the oil is separated, the water has to go somewhere. It's put back underground in disposal wells.
Back in the 1930s, we decided the best place to put it was deep in the ground, about a mile down. Problem is that our volumes have increased and our rates have increased. And now what we have is pressure hitting faults and making earthquakes. So I did some calculations. There's a lake in the middle of Oklahoma City called Lake Hefner. And so it's about 2 of those lakes per year going down into the ground. And that's helped people understand you're going to drain out an entire lake a couple times and shove it into a formation at a mile down.
We wanted to see the wastewater injection process for ourselves. So we met up with Angela Spots, who helped start a group called Stop Fracking Payne County. She took us on a drive on the outskirts of Stillwater.
This is a commercial injection well where the trucks pull in that bay and they open up the back of their truck and the produced water comes flying out. Oklahoma.
The truck.
Yes. The oil will get separated and I believe land here, but otherwise it's going to be injected into the Arbuckle. Some of the injection wells are not as deep, but this one is. And the scary part is this happens all day long. So we have 4 wells and an injection well brought to us by Devon, which is one of the larger companies in town. That's who has been some of the biggest in the fight at the city council. Devon would tell us how great this was going to be and that they would be trying to put a well pad on every square mile. And they'd show the map, and it was blood red. And we have done everything at the Capitol to stop renewable energy. And it's like living in an industrialized countryside. I mean, it's Okie frack land. It's very alarming.
The number of earthquakes in Oklahoma has gone up nearly every year for the last 6 years. By the end of 2015, seismologists predict that the state will have experienced over 5,000 of them.
The people in Oklahoma are walking the plank, blindfolded with their hands behind their back. There's nobody governing the state. Nobody. Who gave any corporation or person the authority to destroy your life and your home and so on? A lot of people are being hurt bad by this. And I'm telling you, what you got to understand is the earth is constantly moving here right now. Constantly moving. It never stops. 24/7, shaking all the time. You think it goes away, it doesn't go away. It keeps on shaking.
Oklahoma is an oil state. From its discovery in the 19th century to the present, its influence is everywhere. There's even a working oil well at the state capitol.
Go to the Capitol and look up and tell me how many oil and gas companies have corporate sponsorships on side of the rotunda. I guess that'll probably answer your question about where we are right now.
Oklahoma and oil kind of grew up together.
Corey Williams of Stillwater is one of the few state representatives who has raised his voice about the ongoing earthquakes. Between 2009 and 2014, the state legislature did not pass any earthquake-related bills.
You know, some days I come to work and I feel like I work in the Devon Energy House of Representatives and I send my bills over to the Continental Resources Senate only to go down to the Oklahoma Independent Petroleum Association Office of the Governor.
In 2015, Williams proposed 2 bills, but got little support. Meanwhile, lawmakers passed a bill that protects oil and gas companies from local regulation.
We show a tremendous amount of deference to the industry. They're the #1 job producer in the state, and people have just become so loath to do anything that might even appear to harm oil and gas, to the detriment of pretty much everything else. We are jeopardizing life, safety, and property in the state solely for the profits of oil and gas right now.
For Oklahomans, 2011 marked a turning point in the conversation about earthquakes. That November, a 5.6 magnitude earthquake struck near Prague, Oklahoma, causing significant damage. It was the biggest earthquake in over 60 years. Within just a few months, scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey suggested that Oklahoma's earthquakes could be tied to the production of oil and gas. But Oklahoma was in denial.
So you had a constant stream of conversation that it was natural. That's when you realized the state was controlled by oil and gas and that we were having trouble even being honest what caused that quake.
Emails revealed that after the earthquake, the governor's office used talking points supplied by an oil company, Devon Energy. The main talking point repeated by state officials was that there was no evidence that oil and gas operations had anything to do with the earthquakes.
That doesn't make you feel good. It doesn't give you the warm fuzzies that there is enough of a separation between industry and government. And if you're letting the industry direct the messaging, then yeah, the science isn't ever going to come out because the science isn't in their favor.
Despite overwhelming scientific evidence tying the earthquakes to oil and gas, it still seems like industry officials continue to cast doubt.
I think I've heard the association say that, well, earthquakes have always been in Oklahoma. That I think the exact line was, Oklahoma has always been earthquake country.
That is correct.
Oklahoma will experience close to 1,000 earthquakes this year. That's predicted by the OGS. So last year, there were 585 earthquakes were reported. That's more than the last 35 years combined. Does it seem disingenuous to say, well, it's always been earthquake country?
It's easy to draw that conclusion. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's right.
Can you describe to us your level of concern about what's happening here now?
Level of concern. Having a 3, it's kind of a so what. If I was sure that there was never going to be anything bigger than a 3 that wasn't naturally occurring, my blood pressure would probably go down a lot.
The Oklahoma Geological Survey is the official state agency tasked with studying the earthquakes. It's based at the University of Oklahoma, a public institution that relies heavily on private funding, in part from the oil and gas industry. If there's anyone who's been at the center of Oklahoma's earthquake debate, it's Austin Holland, the head seismologist.
This is unprecedented in the geological sciences. So we're looking at something well beyond the scale of anything we understand or have seen in the past.
Even though the U.S. Geological Survey had drawn a connection between earthquakes and wastewater disposal by 2012, the state's scientists lagged behind.
So then when did you get the science finally?
2013 was basically when we started going, there's just no way. And so by early 2014, Fitz hitting the Shan, we're done talking about any of this being natural. There are still naturally occurring earthquakes in Oklahoma, but they're so few and far between, we don't even need to talk about those. So this is, one of these areas where current science meets political and social realms, and very similar to climate change.
In 2013, the Oklahoma Geological Survey issued a joint statement with federal scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey, linking the earthquakes to injection wells. Shortly thereafter, Holland was summoned into a meeting with University President David Boren and oil baron Harold Hamm. Hamm questioned him about his research.
It was expressed to me that I have the academic freedom to do what I want. But academic freedom and the freedom to say whatever, whenever, and to whoever I want, those are two different things, right?
Harold Hamm is one of the single largest donors to the university, having contributed over $30 million. President Boren sits on the board of Hamm's oil company, Continental Resources. In the meeting, Hamm expressed his concerns about how talk of man-made earthquakes could look bad for the industry.
He basically said, you have to watch how you say things.
Do you think it's appropriate that Harold Hamm is telling you that you need to be careful how you say things?
Well, there are a lot of people that were telling me I need to be careful how I say things.
That's where these ideas are coming
Hamm declined our request for comment. It wasn't the only time Holland faced pressure. In February 2014, a university dean, Larry Grillot, who has never worked for the Oklahoma Geological Survey, wrote a position paper for the agency which concluded that the majority of Oklahoma's recent earthquakes appear to be natural. While the statement came from outside of the Geological Survey, Austin Holland was asked to sign off on it.
I tried to get rid of everything I couldn't stomach, but I thought this took us backwards, right? In February of 2014, I could have issued a statement that reads a lot like it did in April of this year, saying the vast majority of these earthquakes are very likely the cause of saltwater disposal. I mean, I could have issued that statement then, had the scientific backing to support that statement. And to me, this was to slow things down, right? To give the deniers more time to deny.
The timing of the statement raised questions. Emails showed that the university was seeking a $25 million grant from Continental Resources. Meanwhile, Dean Grillett was sitting on the board of another oil company.
Certainly the dean of the college that directly oversees the OGS being a board member on a energy company, I see that as probably a clear conflict of interest. Those that have financial interests in these companies in one fashion or another may be more reluctant to say we have a real problem and a crisis on our hands than those that don't.
Hello?
Hi, good morning, Larry Grillett.
Yes.
Hey, my name's Josh Rushing. I was wondering if we could get you on camera for an interview. We're in town this week.
No, I'm not going to. I don't have any further comments about anything.
Hey, why in 2000?
Retired. I'm retired, and I'm going to stay retired.
Yeah, but why in 2014 were you still claiming that the majority of Oklahoma's earthquakes were natural? Can you at least?
I have no comment.
Explain that.
I have no comment.
What about it looking like a conflict of interest that you're on the board of an oil company at the same time you were writing that position paper?
I don't have any comment about that.
No comment. There's nothing that you want to say on this. Larry? You there?
No comment.
It took over 3 years for the Oklahoma Geological Survey to publicly come to the same conclusion that much of the scientific community had already reached. In April 2015, the OGS finally put out its strongest statement yet, linking the earthquakes to injection wells. Governor Fallin called the statement significant. Among industries, oil and gas was the biggest contributor to the governor's campaign, giving her nearly $1 million.
Our top goals were certainly very blessed to live in a state which has a lot of rich oil and gas.
Why did it take you so long to acknowledge the connection between the earthquakes and the oil and gas industry?
Well, actually, we acknowledged it quite a bit ago because we wanted to wait and have scientific information based on facts, not just on hearsay.
But as recently as February 2015, Governor Fallin was calling for more evidence that the earthquakes were man-made, not just naturally occurring.
When the governor comes out and says we're waiting on the science, or the Secretary of T comes out and says we're waiting on the science, we're not waiting on the science, we're waiting on our science. We're waiting to find some science that agrees with what it is we want to believe. And we just haven't been able to find it.
This year, Oklahoma cut the budgets of the 2 state agencies dealing with the earthquakes, the Oklahoma Geological Survey and the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. The OCC is the state's oil and gas regulatory body. While it shut down some wells and reduced volumes and depths of others, the rate of earthquakes continues to rise.
Our biggest challenge has been resources. How do we get our hands around all this data? How many people do we have? A year ago, the answer was, oh, let's see, none.
So this is a crisis situation.
It's something that has to have the top priority that we have, and it has to have something, everything we have. But when we call up OGS and they can't get their computers to come up, that's a problem.
Last year we recorded, or were actually able to locate more than 5,000 earthquakes, and we probably had another 10,000 that our systems have identified that we didn't have a chance to look at. So these are the workhorses. This thing pulls in data from all the seismic stations we observe.
So we asked Austin to show us, like, show us the big computer control room. And in the back, there's a computer sitting on a table. That's the server that all this is depending on. And it's kind of hard to believe, for all the state's resources, that one computer on that desk in that broom closet in the basement of a building, that's it.
When you say for all the state's resources, what resources has the state put towards the problem? In terms of, I mean, resources typically implies an investment of money, and Oklahoma as a state has not made an investment of money. They've given OCC $250,000, which is less than some of my research projects, and they've given the OGS, I think, $50,000. But that doesn't count the amount they took out of their budgets when they cut their budgets. So when you say an investment of state resources, a server in a closet is probably about as good as it's going to get.
Holland says that because of a lack of resources, he's had no time for research. But time and again, the governor and the industry have said that they're waiting on him to deliver the science.
I spoke to a homeowner in Oklahoma, and he said, you know, I think that the amount of resources you're getting is a clear conspiracy to keep you from actually doing the work that you need to do. And I don't have any way to refute that.
I mean, there's no conspiracy to pull resources away from them so that they can't do it, but there is a shortfall of resources across the board. I mean, every agency is looking for more resources.
Michael Teague is the Secretary of Energy and Environment, a position the governor combined in 2013, raising questions about the state's relationship with the oil and gas industry.
Everyone's waiting for Austin Holland to write his report, but we're not giving him the resources to do it. I mean, he literally said he didn't have time to write a single report the entire time that he was there.
So I would say that, again, it's not targeted towards the Geologic Survey to pull resources. So everybody's budgets were cut last year, I mean, across the board.
And are they all claiming the same kind of crisis level that the earthquakes seem to be producing?
Several of them.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You compare it to 700 earthquakes a year, any of them?
I'm not saying it's logical, rational, or I agree with it, but yes, I mean, people make the claim that their agency and their cuts are the most important thing, and that's where the resources need to be focused.
Seismologists have warned of the growing possibility that a magnitude 6.0 or greater earthquake could hit the state.
What if a 6.5 isn't enough? How many lives have to be lost? There's a term that many of us are starting to use. We're the sacrifice zone.
Why would you take a risk on a 7 or better earthquake, or even a 6? Why would you do it? It has to be god-awful greed.
I did often feel like I was, you know, just all by myself, flapping in the breeze, and really hung out there all on my own.
In August, Austin Holland resigned as head seismologist of the Oklahoma Geological Survey. We were with him on his last day.
I've infuriated people within the university. I've infuriated people within the oil and gas industry. I've infuriated politicians on both sides of the spectrum in the aisle.
Holland leaves behind a state in which the earthquake rate continues to rise. Not long after he announced his departure, his colleague, Amberly Darrell, did the same. Now, Oklahoma, the most seismically active state in the continental U.S., is left without a state seismologist.